Of course, our melody for Adir Hu, our Pesach classic, we'll sing again later tonight. As you notice that I'm singing tonight, not the cantor. The cantor is on vacation. But Pesach is coming up tomorrow night. Zman Cherotenu, the festival, the season of our freedom. You are all free to sing along, sing along with whatever voice you have. I'm going to sing along with the voice that I have tonight. And so you're in your homes. Make your homes beautiful with the sounds of prayer. Practice for the Seder tomorrow night, where we're all going to sing out. So as I said, of course, it's Pesach tomorrow, Zman Cherotenu, the festival of our freedom. We remember the Exodus from Egypt. We're reminded over and over again in the Torah to remember the Exodus from Egypt. But we're also reminded every Shabbat in our prayers, in the Kiddush, Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, that the Kiddush, during Kiddush, we say Shabbat is a remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. Every day we have prayers about the Exodus from Egypt. So what does it mean? What can it mean for you to really internalize that, really make that part of your identity, to remember that you were a slave in Egypt, that now you are free? Living in the world with that thought, with that memory, with that inwardness of the Exodus. How does that obligate you to treat others? How does it obligate you to treat the world, the earth, the environment? How does it obligate you to God? So we're told to remember Shabbat. On Shabbat, we're told to remember the Exodus from Egypt. Shabbat is in celebration, not just Pesach, but Shabbat is in celebration of the Exodus from Egypt. So let's begin our Shabbat with that light, the lighting of our candles. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'kivanu behadlik ner shel Shabbat. Shalom Aleichem is on page 24. Shalom Aleichem Malachei Hasharet Malachei Elyon Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moachem L'Shalom Malachei HaShalom Malachei Elyon Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mi L'Shalom Malachei HaShalom Malachei Elyon Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Etchem L'Shalom Malachei HaShalom Malachei Elyon Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And let's turn to page 20 for the Chadodi. Chadodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Chadodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Lechadodi likra kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Lechadodi likra kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Yishmi'anu el hamichad. Adonai echad u'shem lo echad, v'shem hu tiferet v'litilav. Lechadodi likra kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Lechadodi likra kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nercha, Ki mikor habracha merosh mikeden nesucha, Sof maaseh b'machshava tchila. Lechadodi likra kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Lechadodi likra kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri, hitoreri, ki pretumi orim, uri, shidameri, kevod Adonai alaycha. Lechadodi likra kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Lechadodi likra kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. If you're able, we rise and we greet the Shabbat bride. Bo'i v'shalom ateret bala, Gam b'simcha u'b'sohola, מתוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי, לך דודי לקרא כלה, ונשמה נקבלה. לך דודי לקרא כלה, ונשמה נקבלה. Let's remain standing as we turn to page 146 if you have the Siddur for Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Adonai, your majesty is proclaimed by the marvels of earth and sky. Sun, moon, and stars testify to your power and wisdom. Day follows day in endless succession, and the years vanish, but your sovereignty endures. Though all things pass, let not your glory depart from us. Help us to become co-workers with you and endow our fleeting days with abiding worth. Baruch atah Adonai Ma'ariv Aravim. If you're still standing, you may be seated. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele Asher Anochi Mitzavecha Hayom Al Levavecha Vishinantam Levanecha V'dibarta Bam V'shivtecha B'beitecha Uvlechtecha V'aderech Uvshokbecha Uvkumecha Ukshartam Leot Al Yadecha V'hayu Totafot Beinenecha Uchtavtam Amuzuzot Beitecha Uvish arecha leman tizkeru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'item kedoshim lelohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem lelohim ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem Emet. We're praying on page 151. We worship the power that unites the universe, a promise of harmony for all. Yet that oneness eludes our grasp as imperfection and evil abound. Before our eyes, there is a vision of perfection, order, and goodness. There is evil enough to break the heart, and there is good enough to exalt the soul. When will redemption come? When we grant everyone what we claim for ourselves. Long ago, we escaped the tyranny of Egypt. Our people saw the power of the Most High. We learned God's presence redeems time and event, so we celebrate this power that makes for freedom with our freedom melody. Mi chamocha Ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh nora tehilot osef elem malchutecha ra'uvanecha Bokei ayam livnei Moshe Miriam, Ve'elianu ve'amru, Ve'elianu ve'amru, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. V'nemar ki fada Adonai et Yaakov ugalo mi'ad chazak mimenu. Baruch atah Adonai Kal Yisrael. 153. We pray for God's sheltering presence. Give us a place to rest, O God. Shelter us in the long, soft evening shadows of your truth. You are our true protection and safety. In your presence, we find love and acceptance. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Blessed are you, Adonai, who spreads a sukkah, a shelter of peace over us, over all your people, Israel, and over Jerusalem. Shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat ledorot v'ritolam. Shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat ledorotam v'ritolam. Ein Yuven b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam, v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat, la'asot et haShabbat v'dorotam v'ritolam. Ki sheshet yamin asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. Let us all rise in any way we can. We rise physically, we rise spiritually. For the Amidah begins on page 155. We take a deep breath of the freedom of Shabbat, the freedom of Pesach, breath of spring. We begin together. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. We now pray for our loved ones who are in need of refuah shlema, a healing of body, a healing of spirit. This Shabbat, we are praying for Marilyn Askin, Joyce Becker, Larry Benson, Margot Blaustein, Eric Blyer, Claudia DeJesu, Nicholas DeJesu, Ted Freed, Mary Jo Glazer, Abraham Grinick, Jerry Gundy, Nina Alexandrova Berlovich Hammer, Oliver David Horn, Sheila Karner, Jay Clapman, Rochelle Klumperbeek, Joseph Lupkin, Lori Mazzarella, Michael Morrissey, Reese Osmond, Barbara Perrette, Judy Ragona, Eileen Reinfleisch, Karen Russo, Don Rubin, Barbara Sabiri, Deb Sabiri, Bernice Side, Glenn Swatinsky, Marjorie Van Dow, Lisa Wolper, Edie Weinstein. There's people putting names in the chat. If you're thinking of someone and praying for someone, feel free to put them in the chat. Ronald Levinson, Rachel Bucksbaum, Patsy Sumner, Barbara Piermont. If you want, you can say their names out loud. We pray for healing, words of Misha Berach. Before modern times, rabbis Ashkenaz in medieval Europe would give 2 sermons a year to the full town, the full congregation. They would do it on Shabbat Shuvah, the Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and they would do it on Shabbat Hagadol, the Shabbat right before Pesach, which is tonight. And so I decided, though, not to give a sermon tonight, because the medieval rabbis, they would give a sermon about all the laws of Pesach and what you have to be careful for and things like that. But I thought, since Pesach is a night of questions, a night of conversations, a night of debate, I would have, we're going to try this on Zoom. There's not too many of us here. So we're going to try an Ask the Rabbi night. So Josh, if you can you, let's put us in gallery view so I can see everybody. And if you have a question for the rabbi, let's say Pesach questions, but it could be like burning theological questions. This is not, though, like not trivia, although I do like trivia and I'm pretty good at it, but let's have Jewish questions, especially Pesach questions.
I have a question.
Please, Gail.
This is really bugging me.
Yes.
How does one prepare for a Passover meal if we have the first night of Passover on the Sabbath? Technically, I mean, right, obviously I can do it because I don't follow any rules. But like, right, if I were following rules, what would I be required to do? You would
be required to cook your food like Friday before Shabbat, and then you can keep it warm throughout Saturday, but you can't cook it more. Like in traditional Jewish law, you can't cook it more. So like you can't have an oven that will shut off and turn back on. So, you'll find, there's a lot of Orthodox people will have a thing, it's called in Yiddish a blech, which is like a heating, like an electric heating thing that stays at one temperature the whole time.
So are you allowed, if you put something in an oven like on Friday and it's got an automatic timer and all that stuff, are you allowed to take it out of the oven when it's done? Like open up isn't that work?
No, not in your house. You can't cook it more once Shabbat starts, but you can take it out. Yeah. Okay. And on a holiday, like if Shabbat or if Pesach started on Monday or whatever, on a holiday in traditional Jewish law, you can do more, you can transfer a fire. So that means you can turn up and down your stove, but you can't turn it on if it's off. But you can light your stove from like a candle that's already lit.
Or the magic pot.
Yeah, the bless. Yeah.
And for those who are visiting another household, you got to either walk or go today or something.
Right. Yeah.
Can't drive.
Exactly.
But most of us will be. Thank you.
Okay, good. Other Pesach questions?
Are there any rules about where you have your Seder? Like, it doesn't have to be indoors or anything?
No, not at all. It could be anywhere you want. That in the Torah, it makes it seem like, and the rabbinic writing talks about this, our ancestors would take, one person from the household would take a goat or a sheep in the afternoon before Pesach starts. They would take it to the temple. The priest would kill it. Then you would take that goat or sheep back to your family in Jerusalem, who might have been camping out in the hills. So people from all over the land of Israel, from Egypt and Babylonia and Rome, wherever they were coming from, would come to Jerusalem. And if you could afford to stay in an inn, you would stay in an inn. But if not, maybe you were camping out in the hills. If you could picture it, there would be people everywhere having a Seder night with roast sheep or goat and telling stories until the end of the night, through the night, because the Torah says you have to eat the whole thing. And if your family's not enough to eat the whole thing, you join in with another family.
What if you never find the afikomen?
What if you never find the afikomen? So what's the afikomen for? I'm going to expand your question. What is the afikomen? So a lot of scholars think that it's this kind of a bastardized Greek word that might have meant the dessert, or it might have meant actually, like, if you watch, like I, Claudius, or, those crazy movies about Rome, where they would, have a luxurious meal where they're lying down, right? That's why we recline on Shabbat or on Pesach, to be like the Greeks and the Romans, who were the free people, right? And you would lie down, and then at the end, the entertainment would come, right? And you could use your imagination what the entertainment was. So in the Mishnah, it says you don't have an afikomen, because we as Jews don't do that. But in the Talmud, the later generations, they didn't know what that meant. So they said, well, no, you do have an afikomen, which means dessert. So how is a piece of matzah dessert? Well, they say you want to have matzah as the last taste on your tongue for that night, because matzah is the bread of affliction at the beginning of the Seder, but it's the bread of freedom at the end of the Seder, right? And so why do you hide it? You hide it to keep the kids engaged.
To keep the children engaged.
Yeah, to keep them awake till the end. Much of the Seder is built around how you engage your children. Our rabbis say, the 4 questions are just 4 starter questions if your kids don't have any questions, just to get them going. And then they start questions about all the weird things you're doing, right? So what if you don't find the afikomen? Well, you got to find it, because you have to have a piece of matzah before you finish the night.
I have a question.
Please, Gail.
For many years and growing up, we always celebrated 2 nights of Passover.
Yeah.
Now in the Reformed movement, and is this an American thing? Is this a Reformed thing? And what percentage of the Jewish population still celebrates 2 nights?
Well, I couldn't tell you, but let me give you the history. I'll give you a semester of Reformed Jewish history on standing on one foot. So, in 19th century Germany, Jews, what were different German states? It was not one country, but Jews were starting to get political rights, allowed to enter into society, right? And so the ghetto walls either literally fell, some cities had actual walls around the ghetto, or they virtually fell. Some Jews chose to stay in the ghetto, and that's what we call ultra-Orthodox Jews, and other Jews chose to leave the ghetto to various degrees. What began then was what we call the Reform movement now. And throughout the 19th century, different rabbis came together trying to think about how do we accommodate Jewish life in modern society. And one thing they decided was that all festivals should be just like in the Torah. So in the Torah, it says that Pesach is a 7-day festival, that there's a Yom Tov, a Chag, on the first day and the 7th day. That means rest days on the first day and the 7th day. And that's how they do it in Israel. And Shavuot is a 1-day festival. Sukkot is a 7-day festival with an 8th day extra that's also a festival, right? And the first day is also a rest day. Now, in the Talmudic times, or in ancient times, how would they declare the calendar? They would look at the new moon, right? And someone in Jerusalem from the Temple Mount would see the new moon and declare it's the new month. And then the new moon of Nisan, the month we're in, 15 days later would be Pesach, right? But if you're living it, and then they would have smoke signals from the temple that would go to all the hills throughout the land of Israel, so people would know they're declaring the new moon, the new month, right? And then they would know when the festival fell. But if you lived in Babylon, if you lived in Rome, if you lived in Alexandria in Egypt, you didn't get any of the fires, right? So in the diaspora, and the Talmud tells us in the diaspora, they would add an extra day to the festival, okay? So now back to 19th century Germany, the reformers said having 2 days of Pesach is, I have to take a step back again. In the Talmud, by the time of the Talmud, 1,500 years ago, they said, well, we're not looking at the moon anymore to declare the calendar. We know how the calendar is set. Why do we still need these 2 days, these 2 extra days in the diaspora? And they answered, well, one, who are we to get rid of the traditions of our ancestors? And 2, there might come a day when we forget how to calculate the calendar. So now we go to 19th century Germany, and they said, Well, we don't forget how to calculate the calendar. Even non-Jews know how to calculate our calendar. There's books that say it. Today we have Google that will tell you what the days are, in the Jewish calendar. And they said it's becoming a burden now that Jews are allowed to enter into different professions. Now that Jews are allowed to go to university, it's a burden to take 2 rest days in a row. Let us go back to the biblical tradition, right? The Torah tradition, like they do in the land of Israel. And that came over to the Reform movement in America since the 19th century. Conservative movement and Orthodox Jews in the diaspora don't celebrate that way. But in the Reform movement in the diaspora and in Israel, that's how we celebrate one Seder, right? One night of Pesach. But here's the big question. Here's the big problem. Who do you spend Seder with? Your parents or your in-laws?
Right.
Well, I would say most Reform Jews have 2 Seders. And so we are having a second night Seder on Sunday night. We're our first time in a long time we're doing that at B'nai Or, and you'll see how I make it different. So as a proud Reform Jew, I'm not going to make it a Yom Tov, a holiday, but there's nothing wrong with also having another Seder. Great question.
Plus we'll have the study session.
Yes.
Sunday.
Right, but Sunday the day is the festival.
In the morning.
Right.
Did you do all that on one foot?
Yeah.
No, I was resting a little bit.
Okay.
Other questions?
Do you have time for one more?
I have time. We have time. Yeah, we got time for a couple more. So Nicole,
Okay.
please.
Okay. All right. So I've always heard it was the Seder Jesus's last meal?
Good question.
Yeah.
So I'll say this: a lot of Christians these days are into doing Seders and adding Jesus and Christianity into it. Is that cultural appropriation? Yes, I'm going to say blankly that is, because we don't know what the Seder looked like 2,000 years ago. We know from the Torah that our ancestors ate a goat or a sheep. They had matzah and they had bitter herbs and they told the story. But we don't know until it was not codified until after the time of Jesus what the Seder more or less looks like today. And, as a non-believing Christian, I can look at this historically and say, I'm not a Christian at all, therefore non-believing. Mary's laughing. And that in the Gospels, if a historian looks at the Gospels, ancient people were not writing works to be history. They were writing works to be religious texts, right? So Jesus' death is put at the time of Pesach, but because to make a religious point, to say that he was the last Pesach sacrifice, right? That his sacrifice was like the Pesach sacrifice. That symbolizes your freedom. So did it really happen? Did he really die at Pesach? Maybe. Like the Gospels say that at Pesach, the Roman governor would free prisoners. There's no historical evidence of that, right? But, so for Christians, that's why Easter is at Pesach time, right?
Right.
But, and it's very important for them in their ideology. But it's but for us Jews, we can say that you doing a Pesach Seder is like taking our traditions, because we don't know what the tradition, how Jesus would have celebrated Pesach.
I'm going to chime in with one brief thing. As Christians, we totally lifted your motzi and your kiddush, though.
Yeah,
but that's representative of any meal. So right, and like that's not. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Christianity evolved from ancient Judaism. Absolutely.
But to celebrate a Seder like we Jews do now feels like a little, I don't know, it feels a little weird to me. And to add Jesus into it and to say that Jesus was there all along, the idea of Jesus, which, is not true. And so, a church once asked me to help them lead a Seder. And this was a liberal church, and they were not like using me in any way. They asked me to help them lead a Seder. And I said, no, I'd rather not help you lead a Seder, but I will teach about the Seder. And they said, that's great. Good. One more question. Nothing? So, good. So, as Nancy said before, join us Sunday morning for 10 a.m. for our first day of Pesach prayer and study. Also join us next Shabbat, which is the last day of Pesach. Gail, it's the 7th day, which will be the last day. Some of your friends might be celebrating 8 days, but you get the okay from the Reform Rabbi to celebrate 7 days of Pesach. The 7th day we'll have, of course, it happens to be Shabbat, so we'll have services at 7 and 10 a.m. the next morning, where we will say Yizkor prayers. And if you've signed up for the second night Seder, Sunday night, I am looking forward to studying and discussing and singing and eating with you, even though we will not be in the same room. So let us begin to conclude our service on page 282. Please rise. Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומסתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding. Loved each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hand, but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. Today was the funeral of Judy Singer Dror, and we're in the period of Shloshim, the first month of mourning for Sylvia Siegel and Larry Jacobson. And this week marks the yahrzeit, the anniversary of the death of Laura Beck, of Naomi Ben Asher, of Albert Bauman, of Eleanor Chayet, Frederick Crimi, Eileen Dribbin, Doris Feldstein, Harold Fingerett, Martha Finkelstein, Earl Flieger, Betty S. Friedman, Jason S. Friedman, Oscar Gervis, Gail Glickman, Anna Goldenberg, Belle Goldstein, David Gordon, Sarah Greenberg, Robert Hoffman, Rose Hoffman, Bruno Kramer, Samson Levine, Toby Levine, Sadie Luckton, Owen Muller, Melissa Nair, Louis Pear, Kate Feinberg Piermont, Anna Pochapin, Samuel Portnoy, Jerome M. Ravid, Alice Riskin, Ruth Sickle, Evelyn Sidman, Ray Trilling Simmons, Bernard Small, Isidore Swatinsky, Nettie Thaler, Sophie Trencher, Justin Wayne, Joseph Weinberg, Lillian Weinstein, Betsy L. Weissman, Erwin Widman, and Edith Wilchfort. If you're remembering others whose name were not mentioned, please feel free to put their names in the chat. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for blessing. The Mourner's Kaddish is on page 294. If you like to hear others' voices, please feel free to unmute yourself. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shmei Rabbah. V'yamad divrach chutei. V'yamlich malchutei. V'chayachon u'v'yomechon. V'chayei b'chol Beit Yisrael. V'agalau v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Barach Le'olam Amei Amaya. Yitbarach Shabbat Yitpar Romam V'yitnaseh Yithadar V'yitalev V'yithalal Shmei Dekudesha Richu Le'elam Inkol Berchata V'shirata Tushbachata V'nechemata Damiran Alma V'imru Amen. Yehei Shama Rabba Min Maya V'chaim Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'romav Kuyaseh Shalom Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael V'imru Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, and bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say, Amen. Oh, we're missing the sound again. That's okay. I'll sing. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru. Amen. Sorry, Mary said in the chat that she could hear it, but I couldn't hear it, so I don't know. I just downloaded a new version of Zoom. Maybe that screwed it up. I don't know. But if you have your wine, go ahead and drink 4 glasses tonight too. Why not? But we declare Shabbat holy with the Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu v'ikaron lepasei v'reishit Ihu yom techila lemikra kodesh zecher letziat Mitzrayim ki banu v'acharta yotanu kidashta mikol hamim v'shabbat kodshecha b'ahava uvratzon inchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Chaim. I apologize, and I'm apologizing to my wife too, because she made a challah for me to bring here tonight to lead motzi for all of you, but I forgot it on the counter as I was running out. So if you have a challah at home, you can make motzi yourself. And I say b'tei avon. I say Shabbat Shalom. May you all have a wonderful Pesach, and we'll see each other again soon in person. I know things are changing. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.